Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on Social Intelligence versus Competitive Intelligence. This webinar is hosted by Comentelli, which provides competitive and market intelligence solutions to the customers worldwide to help them turn data into insights so they can make better business decisions.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kari Syrjä. I work here at Comentelli, and I have the pleasure to work with leading experts on the field. One of them today, Luis Madureira, to discuss these kind of topics from practical perspective. What does it mean for you in business? So once again, welcome to this webinar. And if you have anything you wish to raise up about this, please ask questions or feel free to reach out via LinkedIn or email afterwards. And now over to you, Luis. Please let the audience know, who are you, as you are a recognized leader in this space since many years, and it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Kari. So it's definitely a pleasure to be here with you. We've been collaborating in the past. So again, a new form of collaboration, doing this webinar. Basically, I'm the founder and the managing partner of Uber Brands, and I'm also the Chief Intelligence Officer. So we work in brand building, and we pretty much use competitive intelligence to inform our strategies, to inform innovation, to inform growth in order to help our customers navigate their competitive environment. I'm also a researcher for Nova IMS, and I am a fellow of the Council of CI Fellows.
In addition, I have understood that you are a lecturer in several universities across Europe, and you have been running global brand campaigns and competitive intelligence programs, war games, and so on across the globe. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's move forward with this program because Luis has some quite interesting findings, both from the academic as well as the practical business perspective. And going on to our first slide, maybe the question is that as we have been working together, Luis, with the blog post recently in LinkedIn, people confuses oftentimes this, what does competitive intelligence mean? Some people consider this to be a battle cards for sales reps or click in the CRM that who was the competitor in your last sales case. And that's quite narrow-minded. But here you have a different definition. Would you like to open up this for the audience?
Yes, Kari. So this definition actually results from my work in the PhD. So my topic, of course, had to do with competitive intelligence, and namely the competitive intelligence model. And when I tried to define it, I actually come across a huge amount of definitions. So actually, to build this definition that you see in front of you, we collected 820 different definitions of competitive intelligence, market intelligence, business intelligence, and you can go on. Right. So the problem is that these definitions suffer from both polysemy and synonymy, meaning that you have one concept that has different definitions, and you have the same definition, but you address that by different concepts, so different names. And this causes a huge problem in the community. It causes a problem most specifically to practitioners, because in the end is like, what are you supposed to do? So because of this problem, I actually collected all these definitions, and through a process of artificial intelligence, I actually come across the 5 dimensions of competitive intelligence. So basically, you have these 5 dimensions highlighted here on the definition. So you have a process, and you have forward-looking practices, meaning that you are actually developing intelligence to make decisions that impact your future. So there's no point, you cannot make decisions on the past, right? And this process and these practices are used to produce knowledge. So here is the first, I would say, a little bit a tricky concept, because knowledge is associated with, something that is true, something that happens every time. As you know, intelligence does not happen every time. So if you have, for example, an hypothesis that your 2 competitors are going to do a merger and an acquisition, you need to act on that, although you don't know if that is going really to happen or not, right? So this is the intelligence. The knowledge means that you want to produce insights that are so good that they will become knowledge in the future, meaning they are insights that they will become true. but you need to act on the insight, not on the knowledge. But again, the objective is to produce knowledge. So this knowledge, and this is where kind of your question really comes into play, is we produce knowledge on the full competitive environment, okay? And this knowledge that we produce, the main objective is for us to improve the performance of organizations. So as you can see, the concept of competitive intelligence is really, really a broad one. So summarizing, you have a process, you have a practice, a forward-looking practice. These processes and practices are used to produce knowledge, so insights that will be verified through, about the competitive environment, so the fourth dimension, and the purpose of all these is to improve organizational performance.
That's very good clarification to understand that we don't speak about apples and pears, or if we speak about apples, we speak about green apples and not the red apples or the IT company Apple, that now we are on the same page. But the topic of today is very much that what does the social intelligence have to do with this? Because here you described kind of big picture from 5 different sections. What is this social intelligence? Because, you know, some people would consider it to be just Elon Musk buying Twitter or doing LinkedIn analytics or Google analytics or something like that. So here I see you have found some definitions. And yes, one of them is very contrary to the other two. So what would you say? What is social intelligence from your perspective, Luis?
Yes, I try to give you the key perspectives on social intelligence, okay? So social intelligence also suffers a little bit of polysemy and synonymy, as we've seen before, with competitive intelligence. So if you use kind of my definition, so the paper that I published where I took the previous definition that I show you, I developed a modular definition, meaning that, and we are going to show that next, we can use these 5 dimensions, to actually to basically define all the concepts within intelligence, okay? So if you use that definition, you'll see that the main difference between competitive intelligence and social intelligence is that while competitive intelligence is focused on the overall environment, overall competitive environment, the social intelligence is mainly focused on the social environment. Okay, so if you get this definition, you see that the social intelligence is all the knowledge, all the insights that you produce in, you know, understanding people within organizations, understanding the society, and so on and so forth. So everything that's got to do with people and socializing and social is kind of is what we call social intelligence. Okay, if you go to the industry, for example, of social listening and kind of what most people are these days calling social intelligence, you see that these people are more focused on the digital kind of a part of the socializing. So kind of use social networks, listening to what people are actually kind of saying, sharing, rating online. Okay, and this is the definition that I have here from Dr. Gillian Ney, which is also kind of the founder of the Social Intelligence Lab. And basically she describes social intelligence as kind of the analysis of the digital conversations, you know, so it's like, it's a little bit, it's intelligence, but it's intelligence which is very much focused on the socializing that is done online. And then you have a definition of Cronin from 96, a little bit older, and actually kind of a social intelligence goes back into the 1920s, where you kind of, he basically puts it as the process kind of understanding society, organizations, and individuals. Again, it goes a little bit kind of much more wider. So if you want, you have Cronin, which is the widest definition, and it goes basically to understand, you know, people and society, humans. You go to my definition, which is like this approach, but kind of a focus on the competitive intelligence scope. And then you have what the social intelligence, how it's defined on the industry, which is a little bit more narrow, which just focus on the digital realm.
This is quite interesting from the practical perspective, because if we think that it's only listening Twitter, for example, it has been very active here, the Twitter discussion and the Elon Musk takeover a few years here, is that not all the people who are the noisiest over there making big number of themselves or getting most attention due to the algorithm represent necessarily the whole society. So, there can be cultural differences between, for example, Spanish and Mexicans, well, from my perspective, Finnish people and Swedish people, as I'm a Finnish person in Sweden. But for you, Portuguese and Brazilians and so on, or inside even a certain country, inside a certain company, inside certain family, inside certain city. So there might be different things that these social media do not take into account because the algorithm is favoring one instead of other. How do you see that as a risk when people do social listening, if they only rely on social media when they speak about social intelligence?
Yeah, so again, if you just listen to one source, you are always going to be biased towards that source. So if you just use social listening, for example, and if you just use the digital, you understand what's going on digital, but you will not understand everything that's going on in a specific country. You still have to understand all the cultural cues about that environment, okay? So digital is more a homogeneous environment if you want. If you listen to what Argentinians are saying online, you get their digital kind of a culture. But if you go into the country, you also get, all their history, all their culture, all their country culture. And you also need to understand because context is king. So you normally we used to say that content is king. I'm kind of in CI. I say that context is king. So you really need to understand that. So social intelligence is not just social listening, it's social listening, but it's also, for example, focus groups, is also kind of, shadowing, physical shadowing. So kind of understanding how people, for example, buy in supermarkets and things like this.
Indeed. And that's quite interesting because when people think about narrowing, for example, social media, and if they think in the wider scope, maybe a practical help for the business people would have a checklist. What are things to do? I think, do we have a question, Maleka?
We have a question here that says, why don't you include the word ethical in your definitions? The reason I think this is important is that the definitions as they stand could include corporate espionage, that's a process aimed at producing knowledge about the competitor or social environment to improve organizational performance.
So basically, if we are talking about unethical behavior, we could even say that we were not in the presence of competitive intelligence, right? So kind of if we add the legal, so if we are talking about legal, if your activity is not legal, then you would not even be talking about competitive intelligence. You would be talking about industrial espionage, as Arthur says. The ethical, you can also say that. So kind of as CI professionals, we have kind of a code of conduct. For example, the SKIP code of conduct is the most well known, and we abide by that. So the point here is we don't even need to kind of to explicitly say that kind of this conduct needs to be ethical because we are in business. So in business, we should be kind of we should respect the legal aspects, but also the social aspects of your profession. So again, we have a code of ethics which we abide by.
But that is very interesting because the ethics can be also be understood differently in different cultures. And like you said, context is the king. The earlier slide, we were speaking that, okay, how can we get something practical out of it? How can we build some kind of a checklist? And here, Luis, I think you have the mother of all checklists. There's a little bit too much things that this can overwhelm a normal business person. Can you open up this from the CI and SI perspective that what especially here should people keep in their minds when we talk about this topic?
Yeah, so this is basically the visual or the visualization of the competitive intelligence definition that I showed before. So what you see in the first row are the key 5 dimensions. So you see, starting from left to right, you see the purview or the scope or the sphere or the field, as whatever you want to call it, which is basically the competitive environment, right? So the competitive intelligence is about understanding the competitive environment. Then following, you have the purpose or the objective or the why we need CI. And we need CI to improve the performance of organizations. So most people say that CI or the aim of CI is competitive advantage or is strategy. Those are part of it. So those are done when we make decisions. So we make decisions, we choose paths, which is basically choosing strategies. We choose allocation of resources that will actually kind of allow us to build competitive advantages. So we choose which needs and which jobs to be done we need to satisfy of the consumer. So this is basically how you build competitive advantage, doing something that or satisfying needs in a way that your competitors cannot do. But also, for example, you use CI to provide early warning. So you can actually make decisions today that will impact the future of the organization. Okay, so this is the purpose. Then you have the product. So basically the product is the outcome. So what comes out of the process of producing CI. So it can be, it can be human. It can be also artificial. Basically, if you put the two together, you have what it's called augmented intelligence. And as I said, the objective is to produce knowledge. So you can actually be able to act on these so good insights that they become knowledge. Then you have, of course, the process, so all the activities that you need to do, the process, the methodology that you use, all the activities that you have to do. And finally, you have kind of the practices or the way, the habits that you actually kind of do or that you implement in your organization to produce the intelligence. Going back to the first point, which I actually kind of did not explain, this is definitely where you can differentiate CI from social intelligence. So competitive intelligence, if you see it in there, in the macro environment, you address all the different macro factors. So political, economical, social, technological, environment, and legal. While social intelligence addresses mostly the social macro force. Okay? That doesn't mean that to do social intelligence, you don't need to analyze the others, but the focus is definitely on social intelligence. And also on the meso environment, I also highlighted there in green the online. So this is like the perspective of the industry, which is very much focused on the digital and social listening, for example, using the tool of social listening. But you also, to develop social intelligence, you also need to use offline sources, so human intelligence, so HUMINT, right? So again, this is kind of the point that I really wanted to highlight here, because this is actually what is going to define if we are talking about social intelligence or if we are talking about something broader, which is competitive intelligence.
So it's very much about humans. I think this PESTEL is very good classic. Most business schools in Europe, at least, are teaching that. At least they teach 20 years ago when I was in a business school. Going forward, I think we have one more slide like this, which is highlighting where is the social intelligence part and what is the wider competitive intelligence part and where does this matter? Maybe you could open up this one as well, Luis.
Exactly, Gary. So this is the depiction of the competitive environment. So what you have in blue, the blue arrows are basically the macro environment. The triangle that you see in the middle is the meso environment, or the market, if you want. And then you have the micro environment, which is the industry on the bottom left. Okay, so these three together actually form the competitive environment as a whole. Again, a competitive intelligence professional needs to address all these arrows and the four different kind of items that you have in there: the consumer or the customer, the industry, the geography, and the industry and the players. Okay, so when we come to talk about social intelligence is much more focused on the social part of as a macro force, and then understanding the consumer and the customer. So this would be kind of, the two areas where social intelligence is focused versus the full competitive environment, which is where competitive intelligence is focused.
So how about this B2B versus B2C angle? To get the sentiment out of the market, what did they think about, well, at the moment, FIFA Football Olympic and brands that are sponsoring them, for instance, that is quite sensitive topic, but it could be likewise the business in China or companies doing business in Russia with the attack to Ukraine and so on. To get that kind of sentiment for the consumer brands, it might be relatively easy to measure with existing tools in the market. But how about if people do industrial machinery, which is embedded some little rotors to big machines that go to other big machines in big factories that have nothing to do with consumers? Does then social intelligence be completely irrelevant for such companies that do big machinery?
No, not at all. It's equally relevant. So, for example, people talk about what they eat at the restaurant, but they also talk about their work. So, like kind of the guys who produce the rotors or the big machinery or pharma or whatever, they also talk about their jobs. They also talk about their products. If you go to YouTube, there's like huge amount of videos explaining, case studies about kind of the products that they sell and so on and so forth. So like I would say, and from my experience, I have done it for B2B and B2C, and kind of you can get all types of information kind of from all industries, from all countries in the world, although some countries have a lower kind of internet penetration. So anticipating a question that the audience might have, which is, oh yeah, but there are some countries we don't have like so much kind of a social media or kind of they don't have internet and stuff like this. Yes, but like you can always find information on this. So if you have to do, for example, a focus group on Nigeria, before doing the focus group, you can actually do social listening on a B2B topic, okay, and actually get information from there. And then when you go, you do a much more relevant focus group. So again, social intelligence is a concept that should address the digital part with tools like, for example, again, social listening, search intelligence, audience intelligence, but also should also integrate that with, focus groups, consumer research, and so on and so forth.
I'm thinking in B2B context, for example, the chambers of commerce and like interviews of such delegations and so on in countries, for example, where some social media is forbidden.
CEOs, interviews done to CEOs, transcripts from kind of market days, financial information, all this like you can even kind of follow analysts which analyze industries. So there's lots of people in Twitter that are actually kind of very seasoned analysts that understand industries very, very well, and they share their opinions. So you can follow, I don't know, Rubini, the guy who previewed the economic crisis in 2008. Why don't you follow that? And kind of you have your own, economic intelligence source. Again, but you can do that through social intelligence.
We have a comment from Andrew. He says, there is also split internet with some countries like China and Russia creating closed internet environments with a high level of surveillance as well as the language barrier. But very welcome point, Luis, as always.
Yeah, as always, Andrew, really, really sharp on the ball, as I think you guys in England would say. So definitely. So there are countries which kind of again, to be honest, every single country. So there are. If you know how the internet is kind of a setup, you know that there are different routers within the internet that actually kind of distribute all the traffic. So these servers, these routers can actually be used to monitor what's going on, but also to limit what is kind of being shared within a country. Okay. So what Andrew is referring to is that, for example, in countries like China or Russia, and even others like Iran and so on, you can have a more limited kind of capacity to listen. That's true, of course. But again, like having something more is always better than having nothing. So again, you are always kind of this is as you are coming to this is a complementary approach to what we already did in CI. So before we had internet, we needed to go to Iran, we needed to go to Russia, we needed to go to China to get that information. And now we are able to kind of get that information without actually going there. Also, there are, again, social intelligence is not just social listening. You can also kind of get social intelligence by doing, for example, or doing search intelligence. So this is basically understanding what people are searching online. So in kind of platforms like Google, like Bing, like you, and so on and so forth. And there are also specific social networks and also other platforms which are specific to specific countries, like for example VK in Russia. Okay, so you also need to understand that. We are not going into that kind of depth into this webinar, but this is something that we might explore in a further kind of a webinar.
And advancing further, thank you for the comment, Andrew. If we look, this is a good slide, a little bit showcasing the differences. And I'm very happy you bring in the OSINT and FOMINT aspects. OSINT with Bellingcat has been very much in discussions regarding Ukraine and so on. But for those who do not know what does OSINT and FOMINT mean, would you like to open those keywords here from the similarities of the CI and SI?
Yeah, so OSINT and UMINT are two collection disciplines. Okay, so basically OSINT is open source intelligence, while UMINT is human source intelligence. Okay, so the point here is that if you kind of compare the 5 dimensions of the definition that I show you at the beginning, so the very first slide, you can see that while the process is basically the same, okay, in CI, as it is kind of a normally known and practitioned, you have both OSINT and UMINT. While social intelligence, as it is at this moment, is mostly done by using kind of a specific social intelligence tools like social listening, like search, and so on and so forth. So it's more based on the OSINT side and also on the digital side, as we've seen before.
Isn't that a little bit paradoxal? Like we discussed in the beginning, social is very much human. And I was thinking more about how the humans collect information. And one thing is also, which is normally in the consumer space, is that what humans say and what humans do not always interact are the same thing. Sometimes they're not the same thing. So in some places like China or Russia or elsewhere, or if we think about the former Cold War, there was the Eastern Germany and Western Germany, and you couldn't get almost any information from Eastern Germany. So how do you know what the people really think? Suddenly there was a revolution and the wall taken away. So similarly today, people assume that they know something, but do they really know? And how do you get that information then? Because in the OSINT or the open source intelligence screening, you might only get the official truth. How do you get deeper the minds of people?
Yeah, so again, this is where kind of even psychology, techniques and methodologies come into play. So again, it's not enough for you to go and listen to what people are saying. You need to have the proper frameworks to analyze that. As, for example, you have the PESTEL to analyze the microenvironment, you might use the OCEAN model to analyze what people are saying and what is actually the profile of that person or the profile of that group. So the OCEAN model is like the 5 basic traits of kind of character of anyone. So you can, the O, for example, goes for openness, so people who are more progressive. N goes for neuroticism, so people who are a little bit more neurotic and worried about things. So you also need this kind of, it's not just the tool itself, it's actually the toolbox, you know? It's like, it's not just using social listening, you also need to use the methodological frameworks that allow you to understand what you are actually kind of analyzing. So
exactly. This is not only data to fine-tune the data to information, to analyze the findings. The findings itself are not enough then.
Yeah, so kind of you get to the findings by different methodologies.
But
go.
Yes, I was just thinking that is this it? I mean, here it says marketing in the difference. Is marketing the main use case of social intelligence? And if we are not working in marketing, is it irrelevant if we think about use cases?
Yes, so I see that as both as a handicap, but also as a big opportunity. So if you want an opportunity and a threat. So the threat is that you focus too much on social intelligence, and you focus too much that social intelligence on the marketing side. The opportunity is actually to use social intelligence to actually kind of come up with a much better strategy for your company. Okay, so if you use social intelligence to understand, as I said before, the jobs to be done, the needs, the wants, the pains, and the gains, you can develop much better kind of a products, which in the end will allow you to develop competitive advantages for the organization as a whole, understanding, for example, what the society wants, not just, not just the user of the product itself or the consumer, but also the customer, the society as a whole, the employees, for example. So with social intelligence, you should not be just limiting yourself to marketing. You should be actually kind of developing more of a kind of a stakeholder approach, understand all the stakeholders, and develop a much better, if you want, competitive intelligence. So you develop social intelligence, which will allow you to develop a much better competitive intelligence.
Let's think about practical use case. To challenge you again a little bit in the name of the debate, saying that no, the normal business person will not understand this. So if we are in the CI, the social intelligence side of this slide here, this is very good. It opens up more than marketing purpose itself. Mm-hmm. Let's assume that there's a company that is removing their operations from Russia because of the current situation, and they want to go to other markets, for example, in Asia. And they find some country that they want to try the operations in, maybe Indonesia, maybe Malaysia, maybe some of those bigger countries over there. And while they go to that country, if there is boring industry that is not so active in social media, for instance, and there is not much trade delegations or CEO interviews that was discussed, how on earth would they learn the internal politics of their target companies in such a strange and unfamiliar environment?
Yeah, so Kari, that's exactly the point here. So social intelligence has its limits. So you can, so first and foremost, let me say that one of the first things that you can use social intelligence for is actually, for example, to identify, for example, social unrest, okay? And with that, for example, that can actually lead you to divest in a country, like what happened, for example, in the Arab Spring. Once you get out of that country, you might need to say, okay, I need to compensate all the sales and all kind of the value that I was getting from that country. I need to kind of substitute that country for another source of revenue. So or other source of growth. How can I do that? Which country should I actually kind of target next? And in that situation, again, you can use social intelligence to understand what is called the psychic distance. So the psychic distance is measured normally with the Cage framework. And kind of basically what it gives you is the difference between kind of your home country and the country that you are targeting. Okay, so for example, even the name of your brand, if you go to a country, where your brand name, the phonetics of your brand name actually means something bad, this actually increases the psychic distance, and that will limit your opportunities to be successful in that country. And this is a very, very small example. But imagine, for example, that what you sell is seen in other country as can I say this, as not good in terms of manners. So it's something that you should not do in that way. So for example, you are selling forks to China. So China is like kind of they eat with chopsticks. So kind of are you trying to change their culture? That can even be kind of felt as offensive. So again, you see, this is the type of things that when you do social intelligence in a proper way, you can actually kind of understand this difference and actually kind of work around it and use that to select the best target market, meaning the one that will kind of present the biggest kind of probabilities of success. Does it make sense?
Well, very much makes sense that the American IT companies, they usually land to UK first, as they have the language barrier then tackled in that sense, for instance.
Yeah, or I can give you a very, very practical example, Kari. So most people think that Portugal and Spain, especially kind of people from the United States, sometimes they think that it's even the same country because, you call it Iberia, so maybe it's the same country. So sometimes they even think that Portugal is kind of, is a part of Spain, is like Barcelona or something like this. Okay, so it is not, and the culture is actually quite different. I'm not sure if you know, but at some point in time, Portugal and Spain divided the world in half. It's called the Tratado de Tordesilhas, and kind of so these were like two competing cultures. Even today, there is a kind of a competition, kind of an understated competition between Portugal and Spain, and the habits are actually quite different. So like if you don't use social intelligence, I'm talking now in the broadest sense, to actually understand these psychic distances between these two countries, you might think that for example, you could just kind of open an OPCO or a subsidiary which would take care or manage the two countries. That everything, or most of the times that happened, that didn't really work.
Right, they need a special treatment in this case. But how about staying on this slide, one more detail, internal politics. So if we would like to understand the internal politics of some large company in certain country, how on earth could we get that as outsiders if it's not present in any social media or in any newspaper interviews? So the traditional social listening fails and the traditional media monitoring fails. How can we find out the internal politics in a big, large company?
Yeah, Kari, like I would even like to address this question to the audience and kind of know how many of them actually at some point in time understand their own kind of a culture and their own internal politics. So what I'm asking is, if you ever monitor what is being said by your colleagues in an organization about your own organization? So what do you have different views? Are all of your colleagues having the same exactly kind of views on the world? Do they have the same views on the direction of the company? What are they talking about? This is important, right? So and following on that, not just the internal politics, but as I said before, all the stakeholders. So what are your investors saying about your own company? So like there is like a huge room for maneuver here that most organizations are not exploring at all. So you can use, for example, using kind of a social media monitoring. So for example, if you go to Twitter, I can bet on you that I find a lot of information about budgets, about new projects that several companies are doing. So if you go to Procter & Gamble, for example, and I'm using Procter & Gamble as I could use Unilever or Reckitt Benckiser or any other fast-moving consumer goods, and if I look closely on LinkedIn, I might actually be able to get a lot of the different budgets that the different products have, because people use LinkedIn as their own CV, but they use it as a public CV. So basically they are saying, oh, this is for example, the budget that I'm managing. And with that, you can actually get an understanding of how much is invested into a specific product. Okay. So as you monitor that, you can monitor also the different kind of views of the world that these people are sharing online. So, sometimes you need to be careful, and you can also you might also want to monitor this kind of thing.
Oh, exactly. That's more wide perspective, looking to many different sources, not relying on one. I was thinking at the time of tenure, how long time certain people have been in certain company, their management, are they old or young? Have they been long time in that country or in that company? Are they international? Are they homogenic? Are they only men, for example? Are there women there involved? Has there been major layoffs? Have they been recruiting a lot recently? And that kind of aspects. But yeah.
Kari,
that leads us maybe to the... Yes, please.
If I may interrupt you there, imagine what you'd find out if you start listening now, what the gruntled kind of employers of Twitter, which were dismissed right now, imagine what they are saying about Twitter and kind of the half-truths. I'm not going to say the full truth, but the half-truths that you can get when you get a very kind of, a not happy kind of ex-employee kind of sharing their view of the world, So again, go.
That is a really good point, because there you say one of the ways to find out from such company which is not active in social media is to maybe find the ex-employees who used to work for that company and interview them in such country where they would not be.
And you can see it in the other way, which is, should Twitter be actually listening to what their employees are saying? And they would get also a very good overview of what their employees like, what the employees don't like, how much do they agree with the kind of the strategy that they are following, and so on and so forth. So this is a tool that can be used even for boards to actually to understand the sentiment towards kind of their activity, their strategy, and kind of what they are planning to do next.
And speaking about the next, we have a next slide coming up here, and this is the summary of today's discussion. So we have understood now what is the social intelligence part of the competitive intelligence, where is the focus area and how it complements it, as well as the three different angles to this, the competitive angle, the generic social angle, and the digital conversational angle that we had there in definitions. Before we go to the very last sentence here, would you like to comment this noise part? Because sometimes people feel that they are lost in translation. They get confused because there is too much social buzz out there and you have hard to differentiate apples from pears.
Yeah. So basically kind of a social intelligence is yet another area that you need to address as a CI professional, okay? You also need to address, for example, technical intelligence, patent intelligence. You need to understand geopolitics and so on and so forth, okay? So what we see here is that social intelligence is a new, I'm saying new because it's getting more and more relevance now. So this is like trending now, but it's also a very pivotal part of CI, okay? So with that comes again a lot of data. Okay, and if you use social listening before, you know that kind of a 99% of that is going to be noise. It's going to be a lot of things that are said. Sometimes, like you even need, of course, you need to clean it. You need to target it. Otherwise, you'll get a lot of big data. You get just noise. So you need to integrate when you take that noise out. So this is the first part. You then need to take all the kind of the critical data, and you need to integrate that data of social together. That social data needs to be integrated with, with the political data, with the economic data, with all the legal data, and so on and so forth. So to do that, you are talking about really big data, and you need to have kind of in some form of shape, you need to have kind of a process that integrates all that information so you can develop a more holistic perspective of, in this case, competitive intelligence. So this is where I think that kind of a CI platform like Intelligence Today is actually very handy, because it actually kind of allows us to have different streams of data, okay, especially these new ones that you get, most of them you get them online, as we saw, digital data streams, but also even, normal traditional data streams like a market research or a consumer research, and integrate all of that into one place, so you then can actually kind of get to much higher level actionable insights that you can use to improve the performance of your organization.
Precisely, because one of the challenges is now, if a normal business practitioner, not an academic and not a CI expert, but the normal market intelligence or competitive intelligence person in some company, an analyst or a manager has been listening to us, I think they have got lots of gray hair by thinking that, oh no, I need to track political movements, and economic movements and legal movements. That was not even on my roadmap. And environmental changes. No, I just want to check my competitors. And then they understand that the task is much bigger than maybe is in the current job description. Yeah. And therefore, definitely, if you have to manually look from many different places, it becomes a nightmare. So it's better if they are concentrated and filtered in some area that you don't get that noise problem.
And Kari, one very important aspect of all these is that you cannot do it anymore as a human. So like being a human is not enough in these days to actually to develop competitive intelligence, because you have too much data, you don't have the time, and you don't have the computational kind of a power to actually kind of go through every single data point that you have these days. So you live in information overload. So this is why kind of having a platform which already kind of has artificial intelligence embedded, which allows us to filter the data and to kind of to screen the data in a much more, proactive and more efficient way, will also allow you to identify the small data that you need to really kind of answer the key intelligence questions that you as a CI professional need to answer.
Precisely. I know this sounds, of course, biased from the Commentelli perspective, as we have this platform. You mentioned the Intelligence Today available for all you dear audience listening this. But what Luis is saying is very much what this has been the topic of this discussion. It's not one source, it's many different sources on many different levels that need to be connected. We were in Germany recently in a CIMICON conference, which is the largest competitive intelligence conference in Europe. And there came a certain company there from the United States to tell the audience how great it is to track the stock exchange information and what the analysts are saying. And the dear German audience raised their hand politely and said, what happens when the company is not in stock exchange and it's so small that no analysts are commenting on it?
Yep.
So in that case, stock exchange listening is not enough. The social media listening is not enough. The media monitoring is not enough. You need to combine these different topics like we have been discussing here into one platform. And it's too much for a human to handle, just like you said. I think these are very good to conclude this discussion. We would like to open for the audience if there is any more questions. So we have some leading experts.
If we don't have a volunteer, maybe we can force a volunteer. Raise his hand.
Oh, Juan, yes, please.
I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yes, go on.
All right. So good afternoon, good evening. Thank you, Luis, for the wonderful presentation. A biased opinion on social intelligence, having been in this industry for over 5 years, and I'm very happy to see how always competitive intelligence seems to go in the direction where recognizing that an integration or being complemented by social intelligence is the future. So I'm just curious overall how Commentelli then came to the realization. What was the story behind it? How do you see the roadmap then for both of these areas being integrated in the future? And maybe as an overall question to the presenters, what exciting developments, if any, do you see overall for this integration in the industry between CI and social intelligence?
Excellent question. Thank you, Juan. So if I answer a little bit from the Commentelli perspective and the future developments, as we see it, like Andrew pointed out there in the beginning of the call, certain social media networks seem to be going towards the closed direction, that they do not allow, for example, extraction there easily for different listening analytical platforms, partly also due to European GDPR rules and partly due to their own rules for their advertising purposes. And then in China, of course, it's a different story. There, the Chinese government, for example, is the owner of 30% of the Discord server, which is very famous in the gaming community and the IT developer community. So there are various aspects. But practically speaking today, the client use case that we have got oftentimes is to find out, for example, that if one company wants to follow other company, who are they recruiting? Where are those employees moving in the organization? To what companies they left from there? What kind of key people are there within that company? So that kind of information, for example, is sometimes appreciated by some of our clients who wants to follow up on these other companies. But in general about this, how the merger of competitive and the social listening side of things are going. Luis, you have maybe perspective from other companies around the world. How would you comment this?
Yeah, very interesting question. So I would say basically 2 points that I would like to highlight to answer this question. The first one is social intelligence is still too much focused on marketing, as I said, kind of, and as I put it on the slide. So I think that the future roadmap, especially for kind of the audience who's hearing us, and if you are a CI professional, is kind of you need more and more to use these as a source to actually to do competitive intelligence and not just not just serve the marketing and the sales department, but also to go a little bit broader. So this is definitely one of the trends that I see in terms of roadmap. And also the other one is the topic of big data. So again, we live in information overload. There's too much data. So we need to leverage augmented intelligence. What do I mean by this? I mean that we need to use all the artificial intelligence that we can actually get our hands on that allows us and that to make our a life easier. So for example, things like even the technology that Juan knows very well, which is the entity recognition and, for example, sentiment analysis by entity in the same tweet, for example, this would help immensely for the CI professionals to actually to do their job, because again, sentiment analysis, emotion analysis is not yet good enough. Okay, so actually there are technologies out there. Juan knows what I'm talking about, but we need to to integrate that into the roadmap of CI platforms, CI functions, and so on and so forth. So basically what I'm saying here is that the maturity level of the CI function, is getting pushed back, and we need to start incorporating these new technologies to get augmented intelligence and not just, just the normal intelligence as we used to do it, 10, 20 years ago. Okay, so we need to come up into this new paradigm, in which you get a lot of information, a lot of data in real time. Okay, so you need to also to make the most out of the real time information that you get your hands on, to actually to make CI also in real time. And this is a something that I've been promoting for the last 10 years. Actually, I presented SMINT back in 2012. So again, exactly 10 years. And we are still lagging. So we need to to advance on this path, I would say.
It's an interesting development because some of the market is demanding for it and some of the companies are still backwards. So one of the things about this sentiment analysis, for example, is that once there is no information about certain countries, and again, think about the DDR or Russia or China situations, what we developed at Comentelli was field intelligence retriever, basically meaning that when you take with your mobile phone interview that you record in to your phone, or take a video or take a photo of some conference or a business trip, for example, at the airport, you can send that directly in the system. And that is not itself a separate action. Like Luis is saying, is adding as an augmented intelligence to, for example, that social media listening, to that media monitoring, to the political and legal aspect tracking, the environmental statistics. So you get the bigger picture, but it can be complemented with this HUMINT and the on-site first-party data directly from the source, from the jungle, from the airport, wherever it might be, the traffic jam. Yeah, but I understand we are running out of time. So, Luis, I would really like to thank you that you joined us. And I would like to thank the audience for active discussion and comments, Juan and Artur and Andrew. It was a great pleasure to have great minds with us, the industry recognized authorities. Luis, any final word from you?
No, I was just going to say, as you said, we can get the sources and put the information in real time. But then when you put everything into the platform, you also need artificial intelligence on the platform to actually to extract it and to make it more visible to the professional, so he can act on that data, which is something that I know that intelligence today also has. So again, thank you very much for the audience, for all actually to see my old friends, and really happy to be here and to do this webinar with you guys. So thank you very much also for Comentelli for having me.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.